Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Sales Circle podcast. As you would have heard in the introduction, this is the podcast that is designed to help you to sell more. For me, I believe that anyone listening to this podcast should come away feeling invigorated, motivated, inspired, but also with the skills and knowledge to go out there and sell more. My name is Rob Spence, an internationally renowned sales trainer, sales author, sales coach. I'm the managing director of Paragon Sales Solutions, a multi-award winning sales and marketing agency. And I'd like to welcome you to the Sales Circle. We are now on episode, goodness, what are we on? I believe this is episode 4. I could be wrong. I should probably know this, of season 2 of the Sales Circle. If you're new to the podcast, then thank you so much for joining us and welcome to this incredible sales podcast. Perhaps you are returning. And once again, thank you so much. As always, we'll try and keep this episode to around 30 minutes, give or take. So it's enough time to listen on the way into that important sales meeting, that important business meeting, or potentially on the way into the office or on the way to the gym. Who knows? Today's episode, we're going to talk about ghosting. Ooh, spooky, scary. And the reason we're talking about ghosting at this time of the year is because it's very kept with Halloween. Halloween's coming up. And of course, when Halloween comes along, we get all our spookies, our ghoulies, and of course, the ghosts. But when it comes to us salespeople, we're very known, to send that proposal and not hear back. Sometimes we send a quote and once again, not hear back. Sometimes we get an inquiry through and not hear back. And we're going to explore ghosting in a little bit of more detail today. Now, with the podcast, we break the podcast up into a number of sections. We're going to explore the key topic, which is ghosting. I've had some great questions sent in from listeners, from subscribers, so I'll read through some of those. What else have got planned? Got a book review to share with you and some hints, tips and usefulness to help you to sell more. So shall we perhaps get on to section 1? So when we talk about ghosting, ghosting is all about that. We've all had it. That prospect that goes missing, that vanishes into the abyss. Perhaps this is an outbound sale that we've tried to make. Perhaps we have tried to make contact and we've had some initial conversations and that customer's vanished into the abyss. That customer could be an inbound lead. Maybe they once reached out to us and wanted to use us, wanted to shop with us, wanted to buy from us, wanted our products or services. And once again, they've just vanished. They've gone into the abyss. They've ghosted us completely. And it happens to all salespeople. Now, I've got some statistics to share because here's me sat here saying, oh, look, it happens to all salespeople. But what does the science actually say? What does the data actually say? So, it's quite hard to find statistics that are based just around salespeople being ghosted, but we know that 44% of salespeople give up after just one follow-up. So nearly half of salespeople give up after just one follow-up. Now, I want you to ask yourself this: is that me? Do you give up too soon, too easy? Do you get an inquiry come through when you start the conversation and that client vanishes into the abyss and you go, wow, they're just a time waster, just a tire kicker. Maybe you have had some great conversations. Maybe you've attended meetings. Maybe you've sent a proposal. Maybe you've pitched and then once again, your client vanishes. How many times do you follow up? Because here's another statistic for you. 80% of all sales require at least 5 follow-up attempts. 80% of all sales require at least 5 follow-up attempts. I want you to mull on that for a second. Let's look at that again. And I know I've said this 3 times now. 80% of all sales occur after the 5th follow-up. But 44% of salespeople give up after just one follow-up. There's some great sales to be had out there, guys and girls, if we continue to push and follow up, right? 58% of buyers report that sales reps don't provide value during their conversations, which may be why prospects choose not to respond. So nearly, over half of buyers report that sales reps don't provide value. And finally, 50% of prospects are not a good fit for what isn't being sold, which can often lead to disengagement. So that would once again infer or encourage, no, you know what I'm trying to say, a fact that those leads would not be qualified. But let's look at that again. 58% of sales reps don't provide value. And I've experienced that this week. I had a demo with someone looking to sell me software. It's software that I've reached out, that I want, that I need, that I desperately need for my business. And the sales rep provided no value in the call, no value in the demo. It was a very monotonous demo. It was going through the motions. There was no elements to the demo that was fine-tuned for me. There was no elements to the demo that thought, oh my God, this is great value. I want to continue this conversation. And guess what happened to me as a buyer, as a prospect, as a purchaser? I got bored, disengaged. I went on my phone. I wasn't interested. And that's why value is so important, which we'll come on to in a second. So once again, we know that 80% of sales require at least 5 follow-up attempts. I always say between 7 to 12 is the ideal mark. 58% of buyers report that sales reps don't provide value, and 44% of salespeople give up after just 1 follow-up attempt. So if there's anything that you do today, I want you to think about this. What can you do to follow up better with your prospects? So why do prospects ghost salespeople? Now look, there's a number of reasons why your prospect is ghosting you right now. And it could be a number of things. And I've picked out potentially 5 sort of the telltale signs that I pick up when I'm training the sales teams that I work with. The first one necessarily isn't the salesperson's fault. Sometimes there is a fear of confrontation, okay? It's far easier to ghost, isn't it? It's far easier to not text back, to not message back, to not call back, to not email back than it is to say, hey, look, I'm not happy to go ahead with this. I'm not ready to go ahead with this. It's far above my budget. I'm just not willing to commit for whatever reason. It's far easier to ghost, to ignore, to forget, and just hope that something blows over, okay? Of course, sometimes there's an overwhelm and other priorities going on in a prospect's lives. There's things called social lives. There are things called family lives. There are things called work life and everything else in between. And whether you like it or not, your prospect is not sort of ready to talk to you on every given occasion. They could have had great desire levels at the time they were talking to you, when they wanted a quote, when they first inquired. But over time, they may get distracted. Other things may be going on. They may just have a lack of interest or a lack of fit. We heard a statistic earlier that 50% of prospects just aren't a good fit. So nearly 1 out of 2 people that you speak to just aren't a good fit. And when that happens, during those conversations, they may think it's just not the right fit. So they'll disengage and they'll go back to that fear of confrontation. Sometimes, now this is the biggest bugbear of mine with salespeople. And once again, if there's one thing you take away from this podcast today, it's this. There is no clear next step. How many times have you sent an email, a proposal, a LinkedIn message to a prospect and left it in their hands? Hey, if you're interested, you let me know. If you would like a price, please reply to me. If you want to know more, let me know. Or even worse than that, here's the proposal you requested. Here's the price you wanted. Here's the quote you wanted. We're leaving the conversation at a full stop. We're not trying to take those next steps. As prospects or as customers don't want to do your job for you, salespeople must be salespeople. They must be willing to close and to take that person to the next step. Sometimes it doesn't have to be as cold hard as, look, I need to get this quote signed for you for the next steps. Could just be, look, I've sent you all this information now. Shall we jump on a call next week just to discuss the next steps? Would you like me to send you over the next steps? It could be something as open as that, but never leave the conversation to a full stop. And on the flip side of that, it's very important for salespeople to not be too pushy or too aggressive. That can incur that fear of confrontation. We've all had it, that really pushy, overzealous salesperson that's non-stop trying to close, and they push people away. And so your prospect feels rejected, they feel dejected, they feel small, they feel ridiculed to some degree, they feel scared, anxious, unconfident to say, look, this isn't right for me. And they're the kind of 5 main reasons why you may see a client or a prospect ghost you. There's a number of ways, and each one will come into its own case. And I think I shared some tips on last week's podcast, which once again, please go ahead and listen to, where I was talking a bit more about how being a person of value, being that authority, can really help you overcome some of these ghosting tactics. But let's look a little bit deeper into how we can stop being ghosted. So we know the kind of 5 main reasons why ghosting will occur. How can we overcome that ghosting? How can we re-engage? How can we keep people engaged? I want to make very clear, this isn't necessarily a sales training, okay? If you want sales training advice on this subject, I've got a great online course. It's got 5 stars, loads of people love it. It's been bought all over the world, and it's dead cost effective. I will drop a link to it in the show notes below, but if you go to the Paragon Sales Solutions website, click on online training courses, you will find it there. And I believe it's called How to Follow Up with Prospects. But one of the best ways that you can overcome being ghosted or to stop being ghosted is to really provide value. If you're a bore, if you're not matching your pitch or your quote or your presentation to your prospect, if you're not a person of value, your customer's going to get switched off. They're going to get disengaged. They're not going to want to talk to you. They're going to have that lack of interest that we discussed earlier on today. So be a person of value, be a trusted advisor, be a trusted guide. Help your customer in whatever it is you're selling to them. Of course, we should always set clear follow-up expectations. My biggest thing when I talk about sales training and how we should follow up with people is always set the guidelines as to how you will follow up with your prospect. And the best way to do that is to get your prospects authority to follow up. Ask your prospect, when would you like to be followed up? How is best to be followed up by? What's the best method? And how often would you like to be followed up? I know this, look, Mr. or Mrs. Prospect, I know we're not your biggest priority right now, but I do want to keep in touch because I just don't want you to forget about me. How often should I get in touch with you? And would you prefer that by telephone call, text message? What's best for you? There's then no losing sight of what's right for the prospect, and you're never going to break those rules. Of course, once again, and this is the biggest bugbear of salespeople of mine, and one thing that I talk a lot about in my sales training, diversify the communication. You have a sales toolbox full of great tools these days. I said in last week's podcast that you've not just got the yellow pages and a telephone and a fax machine anymore, right? You have got telephone, you've got email, social media message, you've got direct mail, you've got video, you've got voice notes, you've got physical interaction, as in turning up at an office. And the list goes on and on and on. Diversify the communication. If you have sent 5 emails and not had 1 response back, mix it up a little bit. Pick up the phone. Picking up the phone is so important. Send that text message. Send the WhatsApp. Send a letter. If you're driving by the office, drop off a bag of donuts. Hey, I've not heard from you in a while, but I was in your area. Here's a bag of donuts. Oh, by the way, have you got 5 minutes just to run through what we discussed? That's all it takes. And ask for feedback. Don't ever sort of, don't ever be scared to seek feedback from your prospects or your customers. Why haven't you heard from them? What could you have done better? What could you have done differently? And of course, don't forget to try and find those trigger events to re-engage. Sometimes, look, a customer could have gone quiet for whatever reason for months and months and months and months. If you see some good news to talk about, re-engage. And I think we spoke about following up on one of the earlier podcasts and how, many people can get very boring very quick with their follow-up. Just checking in, just following up, just wanted to make sure you got everything you need. Very cheesy, very boring, very sleazy. Why don't you start a conversation about something that's gone on? Maybe you know that your prospect is a massive Leicester City fan. Hey, great to see that Leicester City avoided relegation this year. And didn't I see one of your colleagues at the game the other day? We're re-engaging that conversation. We don't have to, in the same message or in that same conversation, go, P.S., by the way, would you like to buy from me? We're just going to say words to the effect of, let's have a conversation. When it takes time to move on to that kind of side of things, then let's re-engage. It could be they've released a new product, a new software, a new service. It could be they've had a company website developed. It could be that they've been promoted. Whatever it is, always look for those kind of conversational points. Never be too aggressive. Leverage that social proof and offer an easy out. If we are looking at that reason that people have ghosted you because they're too scared, too frightened, just say, look, obviously I know you might not want to hear from me anymore. Just let me know and I'll be on my way. Give them that easier way out. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of ways in which we can kind of re-engage that conversation. And I'd love to talk to them in more in-depth sales training. But today, what I want you to do when you get to the office, when you're sort of getting planned for the week of sales ahead, think this. What customers have ghosted me? Get a list of 10, okay? Think about why they've ghosted you. Is it because you've only followed up once or twice? Is it because you weren't a person of value? Is it because you're a bit of a bore with your follow-up techniques? Discover why, and what I want you to do is reinvigorate that conversation. Just pick out 10. Just pick out 10 people. Reinvigorate that conversation. Choose a new communication method. So if you've been emailing, switch to LinkedIn message or WhatsApp or handwritten letter or telephone, and be a person of value. Find a true talking point. And what I want to do is hear from you. If you do that this week and you get 5 conversations started from that list of 10, let me know. I'd love to hear from you. This podcast is about providing value and to help you to increase your sales. And I bet if you reinvigorate those 10 conversations this week, by next week, your sales pipeline will be looking a bit fuller. This podcast is brought to you by Paragon Creative Studios, a podcast creative studio based in the heart of Leicestershire in the UK, with plenty of space to hire out for podcast recording, video recording, and the expertise to help you produce your own podcast. Please visit paragoncreativestudios.co.uk. So we're about halfway through the podcast now. As always, please do hit that follow button, hit that subscribe button wherever you're getting this content. Now, this part of the podcast is perhaps one of my favorite, because what I do is I look through my DMs, I look through my email inbox, and I find questions that you, the listener, that the viewer have sent in. And today I've picked out 3. I've got 3 listener submitted questions, and I've kind of pulled out the ones that are talking about ghosting and so on. And this is my time to kind of share my initial viewpoints, initial thoughts, initial feelings. Okay, no planning, no prep, just me off the cuff. If you have a burning desire, if you've got a burning question, perhaps you've got a tough prospect that you've been struggling to get hold of and you want my help, please do email in. You can email thesalescircleofficial@gmail.com, or you can send me a DM. We're across all social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, X, TikTok, LinkedIn, of course. We're everywhere, so send me a DM on there. So the first question, thank you so much for this one, Connor. So it says, how long should I wait before following up with a prospect who's gone silent? Big one, isn't it? This happens to us all. How long do we leave it? It's a hard one to gauge, okay, because you know and own the relationship better than I. It's all about gauging that desire level. I talk about desire being like a thermometer, okay? When they're at 100 degrees, it's boiling point. They are ready to buy. They're ready to convert. But if we take off the gas, if we turn that gas down, they come away from that boiling point. If they come away from that boiling point, they're less likely to convert. So I always say, unless you've not set out clear rules with your customer, if you've not said, look, we'll follow up within a month, within 2 months, 2 to 3 weeks is an ideal time. If anything, perhaps a little bit too long, okay? Start that process there. From there on in, try and make that contact, 2 to 3 weekly is normally a sweet spot. Once again, to be very clear, sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. What we've got to try and find is that balance between being too pushy, but also not being too weak and allowing our customer to go to our competitor. Question number 2, where's it gone here? Thank you so much, Millie. What's the best way to tell if a prospect is actually ghosting or if they're just busy? Once again, it's a good question. My instant thought is pick up the phone. The best way to know if your prospect's busy is to call them, right? If you're sending 10 emails time and time again, people can delete them pretty quick without even opening them, right? Delete them, they're gone, which, as we spoke about in an earlier podcast, just becomes a habit. It becomes a habitual routine for the prospect. But if you pick up the phone, hey, listen, Jennifer, it's only Rob calling from Paragon Sales Solutions. I know we've not spoken in a while. I sent you over the proposal. How are we getting on with that? Is there any other details that you need on that? Is that something we want to proceed with? Sorry, Rob, do you know what? I've just been so busy. I've got this project on, that project on, XYZ. Oh, look, Jennifer, no worries at all. When shall we reschedule? Shall we book in a follow-up call maybe next week just to kind of run through things, whatever it is? The telephone is still the best way to get the best information from people, right? With the telephone, we've got the ability to understand exactly what's going on in a prospect's life. So pick up the telephone. Of course, once again, the prospect may lie, they may tell some fibs, but who are we to judge? And finally, this one is anonymous, no name on this one. How can I reduce the chances of ghosting after a great initial call? I think for me, that goes back to setting those ground rules that we discussed earlier on today. If you have a great call and you leave it in your prospect's hands, the prospect will go off and do whatever. They'll speak to your competitors. They'll have that social life, the family life, their goldfish will die. You know, so many things could happen. So book in the next steps. Look to close the next part of that sales process. It may not have to be looking to close there and then and getting, a check sent in for your product or service, but just take that customer towards the next steps. For me, that's the best way to kind of close the next part of that sales process and should reduce the chance of ghosting. If you can't do that, then understand the ground rules. When can I follow up with you? And how would you like to be followed up with? I hope those questions brought some great value to you that have written in, so thank you so much. And of course, for those of you listening, if you do have any questions, anything to do with sales, anything to do with like business boosting, send them in. The Sales Circle Official at gmail.com or find us on social media. And now it's time to go on to our book recommendation of the week. And today's book is a great book. And actually, let me just find somewhere to put this paper down. It kind of falls in line with the book we recommended last week, The Ultimate Salesman's Club by Chris Murray. This book is called Selling the Wheel. Now, it's quite an unheard of book. Where did I find this book? I think this was like an eBay. One of my eBay finds. It was written by Jeff Cox and Howard Stevens, and is a fantastic read. And the reason for me that this is a fantastic read, once again, it's set out with a narrative. It's not you must do this, you must do that. Here are my 10 commandments of sales. I'm the best salesperson in the world. What they look at is different personas of salespeople and how those different personas of salespeople can help a certain product in a certain time scale, in a certain time period, or anything else in between. And because it's got a narrative, because it's got the ability to tell a story, you forget you're reading a sales book, right? And of course, as you can imagine, it is all about selling the wheel. So it's set in, I want to say prehistoric times. I don't really know when the wheel was invented. We'll soon find out in a second. And you just get swept away in the story, in the narrative. Little quote on the back here says, this is a great book for entrepreneurs, sales directors, and salespeople at every level. It's a must read for everyone involved in building a business. So it's a long blurb, so I'm not going to read that out word for word. But it says here, Selling the Wheel is a fascinating story about sales and marketing written in the form of an ancient parable. Once upon a time, long ago, a resourceful fellow named Max came up with a brilliant idea and invented the wheel. But human beings who had been getting along without the wheel for thousands of years did not instantly appreciate the need for this clever invention. So it goes on a journey, and like I say, they sort of talk about a whole variety of ways. So the 4 essential selling styles: the closer, the wizard, the relationship builder, and captain and crew, and how each style is suited to a different type of salesperson. They learn that as markets evolve, selling styles and strategies must change. There is no single right way, and no company can be all things to all people, which is a critical lesson that is valuable to salespeople as it is to sales managers. This is a great read. It won't take anyone that long to read, for any avid readers out there. I'm not too sure, actually, when it was published. Let's have a little scan through, see if we can find some quick... can't find the right information that I'm trying to find. I'd say it's quite old, maybe 1990s potentially, but still a great read. Couple of little reviews in here. What we've got: what a fantastic read. The book will make you laugh, think, and by the time you're done, you will thoroughly understand the fundamentals of building a world-class organization. Selling the Wheel is a clever story about sales, a story that teaches concepts better than a standard textbook would ever do. We've got another one. The wheel in the story is symbolic of every product or service in the market. The book covers it all. It tells you how to sell and what kind of salesperson should be handling the sale. So look, this is a great book and one I recommend to any of the sales teams that I work with. What I'll do is I'll drop a link to this in the show notes below or in the description below. Selling the Wheel by Jeff Cox and Howard Stevens. It sits on my desk, on the bookshelf behind my desk, because I recommend it to every person that I work with. A great read, a thrilling read. Now, of course, if you've got a book you want me to read, that you want me to digest and review and perhaps recommend, once again, please do let me know. For those of you that don't know me, I believe massively that salespeople should never stop learning. There's no point doing one sales training session and think you're the be all and end all. You've got to read, you've got to study, you've got to investigate, you've got to research, you've got to practice, you've got to hone those skills. No different to any other kind of professional in the world. And reading has been one of the things that's absolutely revolutionized my career and a lot of other salespeople as well. So please do keep an eye on the recommendations that I share. Keep an eye on Selling the Wheel, a fantastic book, and do grab hold of it. And that just about wraps us up for another episode of The Sales Circle. I can't thank you enough for checking this podcast out and staying tuned all the way to the end. Remember, ghosting can happen for a number of reasons. I would never put the ghosting on the prospect. I would put the ghosting down to you, the salesperson, the professional. It's your job as a salesperson to make sure that you aren't ghosted. And to do that, there's a number of ways that we've shared in this podcast. Some of the key things you can do: be a person of value, be an entertainer, be a guide, be an assistant, do whatever you can to really ingrain yourself with your prospect. Make sure you follow up. We learned earlier that the majority of sales happen after after 5 pieces of contact, after 5 follow-ups. And I always say between 7 to 12. So if you've only followed up 2 or 3 times, you need to be blaming yourself. You need to be following up with that prospect. Mix up the way in which you follow up. There's no point sending a person 5 to 10 emails, all pretty much saying the same thing. Pick up the telephone, send the LinkedIn message, send the WhatsApp, send the voice note, send the video, turn up at the offices, send a handwritten note. If you truly want the sale, go out there and get the sale. Now, as a reminder, what I want you to do following this episode is find those 10 customers. Find 10 customers that have recently ghosted you. Write them in a spreadsheet and be honest with yourself. Why did they ghost you? Was it because you didn't follow up well enough? Was it because you're a bit of a bore? Were they the wrong fit for you? You can fix all of those things. And what I want you to do is re-engage that conversation. Whether you've not spoken to them in a week, a month, even a year, reinvigorate that conversation. Find that trigger point, in which is a great way to start the conversation. Slowly start that relationship again and guide yourself back into that follow-up process. I have no doubt that in doing so, you'll see your sales pipeline start to fill up a little bit again. And if you can do that to just 10 this week, imagine how your sales pipeline will look next week if you do another 10, and the week after if you do another 10, and so on and so forth. Thank you so much for watching this episode of The Sales Circle. These episodes come out every single Thursday without fail. Our audio versions come out at 5:30 in the morning for you early birds out there. That's Amazon Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the video version comes out later in the evening. Follow us across all social media for unique and bespoke hints, tips, advice, guidance, and exclusive content. And of course, don't forget, we've got a Facebook group which is ideal to help you to sell more. Join the group. You can find us on Facebook by searching The Sales Circle Official. Come along and join us, join in the conversation, and your sales will increase with the knowledge that is imparted upon you. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's The Sales Circle. Until next week, all the best. And that's it for another episode of The Sales Circle. Make sure you hit that follow button, join us over on social media, and we'll see you next week.